What is your shadow? What are those parts of you which you run from, which you feel guilty about? Why do we find it so difficult to love ourselves? Why does nobody trust people who are always nice? As we go through childhood, society teaches us to recognize certain behavior as acceptable and worthy of love. Being patient, friendly and kind, and other behavior like being selfish as wrong. Imagine when you're born, your mind is like a blank canvas. Everything just is. You have no concept of right or wrong. As a baby, you cry, you laugh, you smile, and you throw tantrums. It's all completely okay because that's what babies do. At some point along the way, we're taught to separate things into good and evil. Society starts painting all over our canvas and then tells us that the darker colors aren't acceptable, but the lighter ones are. We're taught to think that the wilder, unpredictable parts of ourselves aren't healthy. We associate fear, guilt, and shame with the darker colors. And over time, we learn to associate the feeling of love and acceptance only with the light colors. We also get wounded in life and have traumatic experiences, relationship breakups, betrayal, failure to live up to our own expectations. And we learn to paint over these dark experiences with light colors so that we can fit the mold and feel like we've got it all together. Anger, jealousy, sexual desire, judgmental thoughts, parts of us which we find disgusting or unacceptable, it all gets painted over with those lighter colors. Underneath all of these layers, the darker colors are still there. We feel them when we're emotionally vulnerable, we see them in our dreams, we pay special attention to these undesirable traits in other people, and we judge them so we can feel even more separated from the same things we unconsciously know are buried inside of us. What we don't realize is that these darker feelings are a normal part of what it means to be human, and by rejecting these dark feelings, we're rejecting fundamental parts of ourselves. This is why it's so difficult to feel whole, to feel acceptable, why we feel the need to escape from ourselves in endless distraction. But these darker parts are fundamental aspects of who we are. Both light and dark are essential parts of reality, and we can't have one without the other. No matter how convinced we are that they don't belong, they're a part of our very essence. So the more we paint over them, the more the dark colors bleed through the light and come to the surface in unpredictable ways. When we suppress feelings of anger, it builds up into an explosive outburst. When we deny our sexuality, it eventually leads to sexual obsession or uncontrollable fantasies in our dreams. Other unexpressed emotions leak out through our facial expressions without us even realizing it. When we ignore our desire to pursue our inner dreams because they seem ridiculous, our daily existence becomes a depressive struggle. Eventually, this can manifest into physical disease and lead to premature aging. Our relationships suffer, and we never realize our true creativity because our shadow has been chained down for so long. The great psychologist Carl Jung believed that we all have a dark side that can't be denied. Part of the experience of being happy is being able to experience sadness. Every high is only high in comparison to a low. Everything that's light can only be light in comparison to dark. We need both to function. Jung named this dark side the shadow. According to Jung, we all carry a shadow, and the less it's embodied in the individual's conscious life, the more we fracture our identity and hide the unacceptable parts away, the darker and denser our shadow becomes. The people most separated from their shadow are the ones with the deepest insecurities and feelings of being an imposter. But these dark emotions in your shadow have a huge role to play in your relationship with yourself and living a full, whole life. The world is simply a mirror reflecting back to us our own inner state. If you're overflowing with love for yourself and others, you'll continually experience people who are feeling this love, and their love is reflected back to you. On the other hand, if all you see in the outer world is disharmony, anger, and fights, then there's an inner battle happening deeper inside. An inner battle where your shadow is fighting back against your resistance to it. If we don't come to terms with our dark side, we eventually become its victim. The effect of a non-confronted shadow is huge. It creates the need to control, to exert power, and the need to show supremacy, all from that place of insecurity. Because your shadow is always there, no matter how many layers you paint over it, you'll keep attracting what's inside of you in more obvious ways until you learn to accept it. This could be through destructive relationships, self-sabotage, financial disasters, or just a deep feeling of emptiness and disconnection. Feel-good motivational teachings also teach us to ignore negativity and focus exclusively on the positive. In our society, we're encouraged to crush the negative parts of self by medicating ourselves with prescription drugs, literally numbing ourselves to these parts instead of facing them and loving them. So many spiritual seekers think that eventually all of these negative aspects will magically evaporate as they go higher up the path of ascension and open their higher chakras. Many New Age teachings talk about leaning towards the higher chakras and avoiding the lower ones. However, in the long term, this won't actually be helpful. Unless the foundation of your home is solid and stable, no matter how beautifully you decorate and work on the house itself, sooner or later your house will collapse and crumble down. In ancient teachings, there's the idea of the right hand and left-handed path towards the higher self. We traditionally associate the left hand with evil and negativity. Even the etymology of the word sinister means from the left. Muslim, Chinese, Christian, and Hindu religions associate the left hand with the unclean. gene. Over time, studies have shown an increase in the amount of left-handed people compared to previous generations, showing that many left-handers had taught themselves to be right-handed for social or religious reasons. The left hand represents what we fought against, rejected, shamed, and feared. But in reality, we have two hands and we must learn to use them in a balanced way to live a balanced life. The right hand seeks to improve the personal self, overcome its flaws, but the left hand seeks investigation, seeks to be selfish and in pursuit of self-love. Just like the yin and the yang, when you reach a deep balance, suddenly the difference between right and left will disappear. Under every rock, you'll find darkness, but light and darkness need each other to come into existence. By learning to first embrace that darkness within ourselves, we can then experience the light of self-love in a balanced way. So how do we accept and love our shadow? We don't need to indulge in it and let it rule us. We simply allow ourselves to recognize that it's a part of us and we make the decision to love it unconditionally. Most of the time, the biggest barrier to this is that we've just refused to acknowledge these uncomfortable parts. Start by acknowledging these parts within yourself. Be honest and admit the things you don't like. Then ask yourself why you don't like them. Where did that come from? Why is it so hard for you to let yourself get angry, to allow yourself to feel rejected, to be okay with that, to want something that society tells you is wrong? Begin to question all of it, then love whatever comes up. A whole and balanced self is a reconciliation of all parts of ourselves, the opposite of self-denying, subduing, and discipline of the self. To be authentic and whole, we have to embrace the inner self. The mundane characteristics are the parts which are socially acceptable. The primitive parts get sent to the shadow, but these are also the parts which are most creative and unique and innovative, so allow yourself to feel them. Reframe the story which says you're the victim of your shadow and realize that the shadow is simply the child part of you which thought it wasn't allowed to be. As you start to allow yourself to be in the fullest sense with all of your darkness and light, you'll find your canvas becomes more vibrant, beautiful, and inspiring than you ever thought possible.